I was 63 years old when I learned that the most dangerous person in a family is sometimes the one sitting closest to you at the dinner table. My wife, Patricia, passed away 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end, which the doctors told us was actually mercifully fast, though nothing about watching the woman you've spent 41 years with disappear in front of your eyes feels merciful. After she was gone, my son became everything to me. My reason for getting up. My reason for driving the 40 minutes to Barrie every Sunday for dinner. My reason for staying sharp, staying healthy, staying present in this world, instead of retreating into the quiet grief that I could feel waiting for me at the edges of every single day. My son's name is David. He is 38 years old. He has Patricia's eyes and my stubbornness, which is either a blessing or a curse, depending on the day. He works in construction management, knows how to fix anything with his hands, coaches his daughter's hockey team on Saturday mornings, and makes the best chili I have ever tasted in my life. He is, in every way I know how to measure, a good man. His daughter, my granddaughter, is 9 years old. Her name is Lily. She has a gap between her front teeth that she refuses to be embarrassed about, and she collects rocks, not precious stones, not crystals, just rocks. Plain, interesting rocks she finds on trails and roadsides and riverbanks, each one with a story she has invented for it. She keeps them in a shoebox under her bed, and she will show them to anyone willing to sit still long enough to listen. I am always willing. David met his wife, Sandra, 7 years ago at a work function in Toronto. She was in real estate, sharp, polished, always put together in a way that made you feel slightly underdressed no matter what you were wearing. Patricia never quite warmed to her, and Patricia had excellent instincts about people. I told myself it was just the protective instinct of a mother who would never think any woman was quite good enough for her son. I told myself that a lot. The first sign that something was wrong came on a Sunday in late October. David looked tired in a way that went beyond tired, pale around the mouth, moving carefully, like a man conscious of his own weight. I asked him if he was feeling all right, and he laughed it off. Said he had been pushing hard on a project in Innisfil, not sleeping enough, probably coming down with something. I believed him because I wanted to. By November, he had lost 12 pounds. His doctor ran blood work and said his liver enzymes were elevated, referred him to a specialist. The specialist ordered more tests. In the meantime, David kept going to work, kept coaching hockey, kept showing up to Sunday dinners looking a little more hollow each week. The doctors used words like idiopathic and unexplained, and we're still investigating, which are the kinds of words that sit in your chest like stones. Sandra was attentive. I will give her that. She drove him to every appointment, filled his prescriptions, made sure he was eating. She posted about it on social media. These careful, emotional updates about supporting her husband through a scary and uncertain time. And people responded with hearts and prayers and messages about what a devoted wife she was. I read those comments and felt something I could not name, something small and uneasy. Lily never posted anything. Lily was 9, so of course she didn't. But I noticed that when I came for Sunday dinner, she always found a way to sit close to me. Not just near me close. She would lean against my arm while we watched television. She would follow me to the kitchen when I offered to help clear the dishes. She was not a clingy child. She had never been a clingy child. Something had changed. The second Sunday in December, we were all sitting at the table. Sandra had made roast chicken. David was eating slowly, carefully, the way a person eats when they have learned that eating too much at once brings consequences. Lily was across from me, and I noticed her watching her mother with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It was not a child's expression. It was watchful, careful, older than 9 years old. After dinner, while Sandra was in the kitchen and David had fallen asleep on the sofa, which happened more and more often now, this sudden heavy sleep that would take him mid-evening, Lily came and sat beside me. She put her small hand on my forearm and looked at the kitchen doorway for a moment. Then she looked at me. "Grandpa," she said quietly, "I found something in Mum's car." I kept my voice very steady. "What did you find, sweetheart?" She slipped her other hand into the front pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She held it against her leg. not passing it to me yet, her eyes still on the kitchen doorway. "I wasn't snooping," she said. I dropped my water bottle under the seat, and when I reached for it, I felt a box. It was under the mat. What kind of box? Metal. Locked. But the paper was on top of it. She passed it to me then, quickly, like a handoff, the way you might pass something you are not supposed to have. I read it. "I think it's bad, Grandpa. I think it's something bad." I unfolded the paper under the edge of the table. It was a printed page, part of what looked like a larger document. At the top, in a standard institutional font, were the words, "Beneficiary Designation Form," David's full name, a policy number, and in the beneficiary field, Sandra's name, with a figure beside it that took the breath out of my body. $800,000. Lily was watching my face. I folded the paper back carefully and put it in my own pocket. I looked at my granddaughter and I said, very calmly, "You did the right thing, showing me this. Is Dad going to be okay?" I put my arm around her shoulders and held her close for a moment. "I am going to make absolutely sure of it," I said. "But Lily, you cannot mention this to your mum. Not yet. Can you do that for me?" She nodded against my shoulder. She was 9 years old, and she was carrying something no child should ever have to carry. And she had been carrying it alone long enough that she was visibly lighter the moment she passed it to me. I felt that transfer of weight, and I accepted it fully. Driving home that night, I did not let myself panic. Panic is a luxury I gave up the day Patricia was diagnosed, when I understood that there are moments in life when falling apart simply is not an option. I gripped the steering wheel on the 400 going north, and I told myself, "You need to think. You need to be methodical. You need to be absolutely certain before you do anything at all, because if you are wrong, you will damage things that cannot be repaired." But I did not think I was wrong. The next morning, I drove back to Barry. Not to David's house. I knew Sandra would be home, as she had been working remotely for the past 2 months, which I had thought nothing of at the time, and which I now turned over carefully in my mind. I drove instead to the Tim Hortons 3 blocks from their house, where David sometimes stopped on his way to work. I knew his schedule. I knew he left at 7:15. He was there. He looked surprised to see me, and then pleased. And then that careful look came over his face, the one he had been wearing for months, the one that said he was managing something he did not want me to worry about. I sat down across from him with a coffee I did not intend to drink, and I looked at my son. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly," I said. "Dad, has Sandra changed anything recently? Insurance? Accounts? Anything like that?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "She had me update my beneficiary forms back in August. Said my old ones were outdated," which they were. My mum was still listed. He looked at his coffee. "She handled all of it. I just signed where she told me to sign. August. 4 months ago. 2 months before he started getting sick." "David," I said, "I want you to promise me something. I want you to promise me that until I tell you otherwise, you will not eat or drink anything at home that you haven't opened yourself or that I haven't seen you pour." He stared at me. "Dad, that's... Promise me." The silence between us was long. He knew me well enough to understand that I did not make requests like this without reason, and he was afraid enough of the thing happening to his own body that he did not push back the way he might have on a healthier day. He nodded. I drove home, and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. Then I called my neighbor, a retired man named Frank who had spent 30 years as an insurance adjuster and knew more about policy documents than anyone I had ever met. I asked him, carefully and hypothetically, what someone would need to prove to successfully contest a life insurance claim on the grounds of foul play. He told me. I wrote everything down. Then I went to see a lawyer. Her name was Margaret Okafor, and she had an office above a pharmacy on Dunlop Street. She was in her 50s, direct in a way I immediately trusted, and she did not look at me like I was a paranoid old man when I laid out what I suspected. She looked at me like a professional assessing a problem. "You have the beneficiary form," she said. "A photocopy of part of it. My granddaughter found it. You need more than that to go to police. They'll want a pattern. Evidence of means, not just motive." She paused. "You said there was a locked box in the vehicle?" "According to my granddaughter, yes. Is there any way to access it legally?" I thought about that. The car is registered in both their names, I said slowly. David could consent to a search. He could, she said. But the moment Sandra knows she's being looked at, anything in that car disappears. She folded her hands on the desk. Is there anywhere else she might keep things? People who plan something like this for months, and if your timeline is right, she's been planning this since at least August, they keep records. Not because they're careless, but because they're careful. They want to track what they're doing. Where it's going. I drove home and I thought about Sandra. About how organized she was. How controlled. Her home office was always locked. She had told David it was for client confidentiality, and he had accepted that without question because he was a trusting man. I thought about the filing cabinet I had seen through the doorway once, when the door was briefly open. I thought about the storage locker. Every house in the subdivision they lived in had a small external storage unit. Theirs was around the side of the house, padlocked, used mostly for seasonal things, hockey equipment, garden supplies, David's camping gear. I had been in it once, 2 summers ago, helping David find his tent for a camping trip with Lily. Sandra had been away that weekend, visiting her sister in Ottawa. Sandra had come back from that trip and, within the week, put a new padlock on the storage unit. She had told David she'd lost the key to the old one. He'd thought nothing of it. Neither had I, at the time. I thought about it now. I called David that evening. I asked him, carefully, what Sandra's schedule looked like for that week. He told me she had a property showing in Aurelia on Thursday afternoon, would be gone from noon until at least 4. I told him I wanted to come by Wednesday evening to have dinner with Lily and check in on him. He said, of course. Wednesday evening I arrived with groceries and a good reason to be there, and while Sandra was busy in the kitchen and David was upstairs resting, I found a reason to take Lily outside to look at something in the yard. It was December and cold, and Lily put on her boots without asking why. She had known, I think, from the moment she passed me, that piece of paper that we were in this together. I looked at the padlock on the storage unit. It was a master combination lock, heavy duty, 4 digits. I looked at it for a moment, and then I looked at Lily. Do you know when your parents' anniversary is? I asked. She thought. June 14th, she said. Mum always makes a big thing of it. It didn't open. What about your mum's birthday? March 3rd. Nothing. I stood there in the cold for a moment. Then I thought about Sandra, about how controlled she was, about how she would never use something sentimental. She would use something she would never forget, but that no one would guess. Lily, I said, what's your mum's mother's birthday? Your other grandmother? Lily frowned. I don't know her birthday. We don't really see her. She paused. Her address is in my mum's phone. It's in Burlington. The postal code is something, 1987. I remember because Mum made me write it on a Christmas card once, and she told me the numbers. I tried 1987. The lock opened. Inside, behind David's hockey bag and a folded tarp, there was a gray plastic storage box, the kind with a snap-on lid. I lifted it out and set it on the ground and snapped it open. I had been right. I had hoped I was wrong, but I had been right. The box contained 4 things. A small spiral notebook, the kind you buy at a dollar store. A Ziploc bag containing what looked like a pharmaceutical bottle with a handwritten label. A printed document that turned out to be a second life insurance policy I had never heard of. This one through a different company, with a death benefit of $450,000. And a prepaid phone, powered off, still in its packaging, the kind you pay for with cash. I did not touch anything with my bare hands after the first moment. I was wearing my winter gloves, and I kept them on. I looked at each item carefully, without moving them more than necessary. The notebook was the worst of it. Sandra's handwriting, I recognized it from grocery lists I had seen on their kitchen whiteboard filling page after page in neat, small print. Dates going back 9 months. Entries that documented, methodically and without emotion, a schedule of administration, dosages, timing, observations about David's response, notes about his medical appointments and what the doctors had and hadn't found, a column that tracked what she called his baseline, and a column where she noted deviations. There was a page near the middle where she had written, still too slow, increasing, and a date 3 weeks before David's weight loss had become visible to me. I stood in the cold beside that box for what felt like a very long time. I was aware of Lily standing behind me, and I did not want her to see what I was looking at. I closed the lid. I snapped it shut. I put it back exactly where I had found it, behind the hockey bag, in the same position I had found it. I closed the storage unit and clicked the padlock shut and reset the dial. Then I turned around and I looked at my granddaughter and I said, "Go inside and get warm. Tell your mom I'm just finishing up a call." She searched my face. "Is it bad?" "I'm going to fix it," I said. "That's all you need to know." I walked to the end of the driveway in the dark and I called Margaret Okafor's emergency line. She answered on the third ring. I told her what I had found, described each item, gave her the location. She was quiet for a moment, and then she said, "Thursday noon. She'll be in Aurelia by 12:15 at the latest. I'll have someone there by 11. "The police?" I asked. "The police," she said. "Mr. Harmon, you've done everything exactly right. Let us take it from here." I went back inside. I sat at the dinner table with my son and my granddaughter, and I ate the meal Sandra had cooked, and I talked about the Leafs, and about Lily's school play, and about whether David wanted me to come help him clean out the garage before the snow got serious. I drank the tea Sandra made, which I had watched her pour from a common pot, and I was careful to watch that. I was careful about everything that evening. My face did not show a single thing I was thinking. When I hugged David goodbye at the door, I held on a moment longer than usual. He noticed. He looked at me with something in his eyes that was not quite a question and not quite an understanding, but was somewhere between the two. "Get some sleep," I told him. "Things are going to get better." Thursday came. I did not go to Barry. I stayed home and I waited, which is the hardest thing I have ever done in my life, and I include those 11 weeks with Patricia. The waiting with Patricia was terrible, but it was at least a known thing, a fixed trajectory. Thursday was waiting without knowing when or whether the phone would ring or what it would say when it did. Margaret called at 2:47 in the afternoon. "They found the box," she said. "It's exactly as you described. The bottle contains a compound. I don't have the full analysis yet, but the preliminary indication is a heavy metal compound, potentially thallium. They're testing David's blood work now, against the timeline in the notebook." I sat down on my kitchen chair. "She was at the property showing in Aurelia," Margaret continued. "The officers were waiting for her when she got back. She's been taken in for questioning." A pause. "The preliminary charge will likely be attempted murder. There may be additional charges pending the financial investigation. There are some irregularities in the second policy that suggest she may have falsified documents during the application." I listened to all of it. I thanked her. I hung up the phone and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time without moving. Then I called my son. He answered immediately, which told me he had been waiting by his phone all day, that some part of him had understood something was happening even without knowing what. His voice was careful when he said hello. "David," I said, "I need you to listen to me. I'm going to tell you something that is going to be very hard to hear, and I need you to let me finish before you say anything." The sound that came out of him when I had finished talking was not a word. It was the sound a person makes when the architecture of their understanding of their own life collapses all at once. I stayed on the phone. I said nothing useful, because there was nothing useful to say. I just stayed. "Lily," he said finally. "She knew. She found something, and she came to me. She protected you." He was quiet for a long time. "She's been living in that house with her dad. She's been..." He couldn't finish the sentence. "She's all right," I said. "She is incredibly all right, actually. She's stronger than either of us gave her credit for." "Where is she now?" "She's at school. I've already spoken to the principal's office. There's an officer there as a precaution. She's safe." Another silence. I heard him exhale slowly. "What do I do now?" "Right now, you do nothing. You let the people who know what they're doing do their work. And then you call your doctor and you tell them everything we know and you let them figure out what the next steps are for you medically. And then you come home and you wait for your daughter and you hold her and you tell her she was the bravest person you know. What about..." He stopped. He couldn't say her name yet. "You don't have to think about that part yet," I said. "That part takes care of itself. In time. Right now there's only one thing that matters. and it's that you're alive, and she didn't win. I drove to Barry that evening. I picked Lily up from school myself, which I had arranged with David. She came out of the building with her backpack and her winter coat, and she stopped when she saw me at the curb instead of the school bus. She looked at me for a moment with those careful eyes. "Is it done?" she asked. "It's done." She walked the rest of the way to the car and got in and put her seatbelt on. And then she looked straight ahead through the windshield for a moment and said, "I've been scared for a long time." I started the car. "I know you have." I didn't know if I was imagining things. I didn't know if it would make things worse to say something. "It made things better," I said. "It made everything better. You saved your dad, Lily." She was quiet until we turned onto their street, and then she said, in the most matter-of-fact 9-year-old voice I have ever heard, "I thought she was doing something to him since September. I've been waiting for a grown-up to notice since September." I pulled into the driveway and I turned to look at her. "I'm sorry it took me so long," I said. She shrugged in the way of someone who has accepted an imperfect outcome as the best available outcome. "You came when I told you," she said. "That's what matters." David was in the kitchen when we walked in. He was still pale, still thin, still moved like someone conserving energy. But there was something different in his face. The particular hollowness of a person carrying a secret weight alone was gone. He crossed the kitchen and went down on one knee to be at Lily's level, and he held his daughter for a long time without saying anything. Lily let him. She patted him on the back once, twice, the way a child pats a parent when the parent is the one who needs reassurance. I turned away and looked out the kitchen window at the backyard in the dark. The following weeks were difficult in the complicated, procedural way that justice systems are difficult. There were statements to give, lawyers to coordinate with, medical consultations to attend. David's doctors, now armed with the timeline from the notebook, adjusted their approach and began treating him for what turned out to be chronic, low-level thallium poisoning. Slow enough not to trigger standard testing, sustained enough to destroy him by degrees. His recovery was not fast, but it was certain. By February, he had put back most of the weight. By March, he was back at work, part-time. By April, he was coaching hockey again on Saturday mornings, and I drove 40 minutes to watch from the rink boards and felt something I had not felt in years, which was uncomplicated gratitude. Sandra was charged with attempted murder and fraud in the first degree. The investigation uncovered that the second insurance policy had been taken out using forged medical documents. David's signature on the application was not his. Her lawyer entered a plea of not guilty, which surprised no one and changed nothing. The evidence was what the evidence was. A notebook in her handwriting, a substance in a bottle with her fingerprints on it, a financial trail that investigators described in court documents as meticulous. She had been meticulous. She had been meticulous about everything except the one thing she had not been able to plan for, which was a 9-year-old girl who dropped her water bottle under the passenger seat of a car. There is something I want to say about that, because I have had a long time to think about it. Sandra was not impulsive. This was not a crime of passion or desperation. She had spent months planning, months executing, months watching her husband slowly deteriorate and telling the world what a devoted wife she was. She was organized. She was intelligent. She had, by every available measure, thought of everything, except that she had not thought about what her daughter could see. Children see things adults have learned to look away from. They do not yet have the social training that tells them certain things are not their business. Certain suspicions are impolite. Certain anxieties should be kept to themselves. Lily watched her mother for months with the clear, unfiltered eyes of a child who did not yet know she was supposed to pretend not to notice. And she noticed everything. She noticed that her mother was unusually calm during her father's illness, in a way that was different from Patricia's calm during her own illness. The quiet, sad, fighting calm of a person facing something real. Sandra's calm was a different kind. Lily could not have articulated the difference at 9 years old, but she felt it. She noticed that her father's symptoms were worse on days when her mother had made his meals, and better on days, rare as they were, when he had eaten out or when someone else had cooked. She noticed the way her mother's face sometimes changed when she thought no one was watching. an expression that came and went too quickly for an adult to catch, but not quickly enough to get past Lily. She noticed the box under the car mat because she dropped her water bottle, which is to say she noticed it partly by accident. The way important things sometimes arrive not because you were looking for them, but because you happen to be in the right position at the right moment with your eyes open. I think about all of this when people ask me what I want them to take from what happened. And people do ask, more than you might expect. Neighbors, friends of friends, my own doctor, who heard the story through the particular osmosis of small city information and asked me about it with the careful interest of someone who sees human nature in its rawest forms on a regular basis. What I tell them is this: listen to the children, not just when they speak directly, though that matters. The courage it takes for a child to hand an adult a piece of paper and say, "I think something is wrong," is not a small thing, and it should not be received as a small thing. But also listen to the ways they behave before they find the words. The way Lily attached herself to me at every Sunday dinner for months before she said a single word. The way she watched the kitchen doorway. The way she positioned herself near me as though I were the safe side of a room. Children cannot always name what they know, but they know it. And sometimes, if you are paying attention, they will find a way to tell you. My son is 38 years old, and he is alive. He coaches hockey on Saturday mornings. He makes chili that I will maintain, without qualification, is the best chili I have ever tasted in my life. He has full custody of his daughter, which was never in question, and he is raising her in a house that is quieter than it used to be, and more honest. And Lily has started a new collection, not just rocks now, but pressed leaves and interesting feathers and small bits of sea glass she finds at Wasaga Beach in the summers, when we drive down there together, the three of us, and walk along the water in the long Canadian evenings, when the light goes golden and stays that way for what seems like longer than physics should allow. He asked me once, about 6 months after everything, whether I had known for certain when I drove back to Barrie that first morning after speaking with Lily. Whether I had been sure. I thought about it honestly. No, I said. I wasn't certain. I was afraid I was right. What's the difference? Being certain means you act because the math worked out. Being afraid you're right means you act because the cost of being wrong is too high. I looked at him across the dinner table, his dinner table, in his kitchen, the kitchen that was his again, in the way a space belongs to someone when it is safe. I have never been more afraid of anything in my life than I was of being right about that. He nodded slowly. But you acted anyway. You were my reason, I said. You have always been my reason. Lily was in the living room while we talked, arranging rocks on the coffee table with the careful logic of a curator, each one in its place, each one with its story. I could hear her talking quietly to herself, explaining something to no one in particular, or maybe explaining it to all of us, whether we were listening or not. I have been a father for 38 years. I have been a grandfather for 9. I was a husband for 41 years, which ended in a hospital room in September, and which I will grieve until I stop drawing breath. And I mean that without self-pity, only as a statement of measurement. That is how much that woman meant to me, that the subtraction of her still registers daily. But I have also been a man who drove 40 minutes on a cold Tuesday morning because his son looked wrong, who took a piece of paper from a child's careful hands and understood what it was asking of him, who stood in the cold beside a gray plastic box and looked at the evidence of a slow, careful attempt on his son's life and did not fall apart, because falling apart was not useful, and I had, by that point, had enough practice. You do not get to choose the tests. You only get to choose whether you show up for them. I showed up. Lily showed up first, and then I showed up behind her. And between the two of us, we pulled my son back from wherever Sandra was trying to send him. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, and I hold tightly to the times that it is true, the people you love most are still here, still eating chili at the kitchen table, still coaching hockey in the cold, still talking to rocks on the coffee table with the absolute conviction of someone who knows that every ordinary thing is also, if you look at it correctly, a small miracle. I am 63 years old. My hair is gray, and my knees complain on cold mornings, and I still reach for the phone some days to call Patricia before I remember. But I drive to Barrie every Sunday. And every Sunday, my son opens the door before I knock, because he hears my truck in the driveway. And every Sunday, Lily shouts from somewhere in the house, "Grandpa's here," as though it is news, as though it is something worth announcing. It is. It always has been. I just understand that more clearly now than I did before. If you are watching this, and there is something pulling at the edge of your attention, something about a person you love, something that does not add up, something a child in your life is trying to tell you without yet having the words, "Please listen. Please act." Please do not wait for certainty before you decide that the person you love is worth the discomfort of being wrong. They are worth it. They are always worth it. And if you are lucky, and you are brave, and you do not look away, when looking away would be easier sometimes, you get to keep them. I gotta keep mine. If this story touched you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you have a story of your own, a moment when love made you brave, when a child said something that changed everything, when you acted on instinct and it turned out to be the right thing, leave it in the comments. I read every one, every single one.